Yes.
Yeah.
See?
We're gonna buy you a stand.
We're on Chaf Amud Aleph. Chaf Amud Aleph, 20. Kesubos 20. Ukshem Shem Ezim Sa'edim Ela B'fneihem. We talked about Eidim Zomimim. Two Eidim say they saw Reuben and Shimon kill Chaim Yankel, 1 o'clock Monday at 1 p.m. And they're brought to court. And there's going to be a trial. Or even if they're in the midst of the trial of Chaim Yankel as a Rotseach. So if there was Eidim and Hasra, if there was Eidim and a warning to Chaim Yankel, so Chaim Yankel will be put to death. Meanwhile, before Chaim Yankel is put to death, two other Eidim show up and say, you know what, the first pair of Eidim, Monday at 1 o'clock, they were in Disneyland with us. So they couldn't be present there. So that's called the Eidim Zone. Now, we learned yesterday the concept of Eidei HaKosha. That if the first set of Eidim give facts of the case, another group of Eidim give different facts of the case, so they cross each other out. Meaning, we don't believe one set over the other, whether it's the first, whether it's the second. We don't privilege one set of the Eidim. Eidim Zomimim is Xeris HaKosha. But we don't care what happens. If the second Eidim show up and they say, Imanu Ma'yisem, end of story. We take the first two Eidim out, we put them to death. But why don't we say, well, it's two different, no, because the Gemara says, the Torah says we believe the second Eidim. There's no logic for it. It's Xeris HaKosha that we believe the second group, even though, like we learned yesterday, Eidei HaKosha, we don't necessarily believe the first because the second cancels it out. And we don't believe the second. We don't privilege either the first or the second. It's only by the Eidim Zomimim that we privilege the second testimony.
I ran with two more people, I think.
Okay, great.
See if they show up.
Okay, then Chaf, or Chaf Amud Aleph, 20. Kshem Shem is even Seidim L'Bifneihem. Now, this didn't, there's in American jurisprudence, you get the chance to face your accuser.
Correct.
Right? There were a lot of these cases, right? Remember in Law and Order, right? There's a stewardess who's in Portugal, in Brazil. You can't try the case because an accused has the right to face his accuser. So the Gemara gets it from the Gemara. Kshem Shem is even Eidim El Bifneihem. Eidim Zomimim only work if the Eidim testify in front of the other Eidim. Same thing. When you do Hakosha, when you contradict a set of facts from the first set of Eidim, it also has to be done in front of their face. If we were there and they were doing Hakosha, then they would break the testimony of the first set of Eidim. We would not believe the first set of Eidim. But Hashta the less. But now we don't have that. Havla come on Dilma and because maybe if they presented, they would admit that they were false Eidim. Like we said, they were Ktanim, they were Anusim. Man, why should we believe them? Amar of Nachman, we have a principle. Oiki tre lahadi tre. The two sets of Eidim on the star, one says the star is good, the other says the star is not good. Cancel each other out. What does the star want to do? The star wants to transfer money from him to him. However, because now we don't have a valid star, leave the money where it is. Because remember, hamotzi mechabero alav. To take money out of somebody, you are the one, the burden of proof is on you. Otherwise, we leave the money where it is. It should be like the case of the assets of a case called a bar shatya. He was called that. Sometimes he would be a Meshiganer, other times he was normal. So write the word shote. The bar shatya is zabin nichsa. This bar shatya, who was called bar shatya, sold something. Also betray Amri, Keshu shoiteza. He sold it when he was a shoite. So it's not really sale. Also betray Amri, Keshu chalimzak. No, he was well. He had normal sanity when he sold. Amr Vashi, Uki tre ladi tre. The two testimonies cross each other. The Uki mamona b'cheskes bar shatya. And you keep the original asset with bar shatya. For this to work, we have to know for sure that his father was the one who gave him that asset. Otherwise, we don't know for sure. It was in the bar shatya's possession. We would say he sold it when he was Meshiganer. He bought it when he was Meshiganer and he sold it when he was Meshiganer. Again, I'm going to review Eidim Zomamin, Reuben and Shimon come and give testimony that Levi killed Yehuda 1:00 Monday afternoon. Yisachar and Zvulun come, and they're trying, whoever I said was the murderer, was it God? Yeah, God. What did I say? Levi killed Yehuda. Right, so, and Reuben and Shimon said Levi is the murderer. And in Bessin, they want to kill Levi. They haven't killed him yet. Meanwhile, Yisachar won't show up. They say, no, Reuben and Shimon, 1:00 on Monday, they were in Disneyland with us. That's a classic case of Eidim Zomamin. We believe the second. It's not kosher. We believe that. And we kill the first set of Eidim. Kosher, we cross each other out. It's exeris hakosuf that Eidim Zomamin is different. And the process only works if it has to be done in the presence of the other Eidim. However, Makisha is Eidim Shlom. Hakosha, where Reuben and Shimon testified that the guy was wearing a black shirt, and the other Eidim testified he was wearing a white shirt, and he was roller skating, and he did some other action. Well, Reuben and Shimon say no, he was wearing a white shirt, he was not roller skating, and he did something else. So the two Eidim cancel each other out. That the second group of Eidim that are going to cancel out the first doesn't have to be in the presence of the first set of Eidim. Eidim Zomamin has to be in the presence of the first set of Eidim, but not if you sort of contradict the facts of the first set of Eidim. Not Eidim Zomamin. Zomamin shlo b'fneiim. Neida Zomamin lo aver. Neida Zomamin lo aver. Akosh mi'aver. Now, when somebody shows up and gives testimony of Eidim Zomamin, but not in the presence of the other Eidim. So we say, Bezin will not be able to kill such people because it only works if they were done in the presence of the Eidim. But every Hazama is also Hakosha. If you had a Venn diagram, right? Subset. Hi, Johnny. This is a subset. Certainly, if you say that they were with me in Disneyland, they're being makhish, they're contradicting the other set of Eidim. If that can be done, shalom stand. So at least Hakosha goes on. Hazama doesn't go on, but at least you break the testimony of the first Eidim. Johnny, we're on Chaf 20, Amar Aleph, halfway down. Amar Mar. Yesh Eidim sheksav yodam huzeh. So we said in the Mishnah, you have a star. So this man owes this man $1,000. At the bottom of the star is Eidim. Now, if two Eidim show up and say, yeah, that's my signature. So they themselves validated the star. Or they have another star that came from somewhere else. Oh, and the first case, Yeah, they say this was my signature. Then they say they have another case where the star showed up from another municipality. Mishtar Shakar Alav Ir. Somebody questioned the validity of the star. And therefore, it was investigated. They called out, bring the Eidim, and they did it. V'huchzik bebezdin. And Bezdin certified it. And they put something called a handpick on the star. And then therefore, if another Bezdin gets such a star, they know that this is a certified star. And they know therefore that they interrogated and they made sure that these Eidim were kosher Eidim. Now, we said, Ein Ne'emonim. Now, in the case where the star came not from their own mouth, but it came from another star, so and then they wanted to say, oh, those Eidim were Ketanim or Psulim, so those people are not believers. It's only if they themselves say it. But if it came from somewhere else, it's not a Pesha Asr or Pesha Yitim. Now, Karalav Ira in. Loy Karlav Ira. The Gemara gives us a halacha that this process only works if there was a question raised about that star. If let's say they're just bringing a star, there's no question raised about it, you can't use it for certification. The Sila Rabasi supports Ravasi, Ravasi. You can only use a star to document and validate Eidim if a rumor was that the star was not appropriate and they investigated. You need two stars. It's not enough one. You need two different subos, two different stars documenting the sale of the field. Not only that, there's other criteria to determine whether we're going to use this star to validate this star. If a person is in a field for 3 years and eats, and nobody chases him out of the field, he has chazak in that field. So if he has a star and he was in that field for 3 years and nobody complained, we know everything was hunky-dory. Then you can use that star to validate signatures. Listen to the other criteria. If I'm the Baldin, I'm the one that wants to collect on this star. I can't be the one to bring the star. It has to be a third party has a star that was Mekuyim on a field. It can't be me. B'yadatzmo lo. Again, we're suspicious he might have formed because he's trying to validate his star. Maybe he counterfeited it. So maybe that other guy showed up to this guy's house, saw the signatures and forged it. To worry that some stranger is going to come to his house, see the signatures on that star, and counterfeit it, we're not worried for that. That's why we accept it. Here's a new thing. We've always learned that in halacha, Eidim have to give oral testimony in Bezdin. Not so, says the Brisa. He can write his testimony on a star. He can then sign it even after many years passed after he wrote it. However, he has to remember the details by himself. He can't be prompted by somebody else. You know what? Even if he doesn't remember it by himself, but somebody sort of prompts him, and then it all comes back, that would work as well. You have two people who viewed an event. And one of them forgot the details. Now, the other aide who remembers everything can give him some hints and remind him. Rav Yochanan said, "Aval pi she'ein zoich b'ma'atzmo." Even if the aide doesn't remember everything by himself. No matter, in that case, he wrote it all down. Here it happened sort of simultaneously. Now, first of all, let's see what the halacha says. Shulchan Aruch says, "Rishai adam lichtov dvar la'atzmo l'zachar." You can write it down to remember. Later on, he comes to court and they ask him to testify. He can look in his notes. Ma'ayin because of umeid. V'afilu kasheinu zoch ma'atzmo. Ela mitoch hadvar maksuvim. Rav Yochanan. So that's what's going on here. Person sees an event, writes it down. Then he goes to court. They ask him the case. He doesn't remember it without looking in the document, without looking to remind him. By the way, I get deposed in medical legal cases all the time. The attorneys always ask me, do you have an independent memory of the patient? Or are you basing it based on what you wrote, the notes that you take? I might have seen the patient 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So they asked.
That makes a difference.
No, you know what? You know what? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
It might. We'll have to ask Susie.
Yeah.
But I am asked that. I am asked.
What's your answer?
Depends. Sometimes I do remember the patient. Sometimes I don't. I answered it exactly. I mean, I always know the case because I've written down, I've dictated a note. So there's a detailed note. But sometimes you might not necessarily physically remember the way the patient looked like or whatever. Sometimes absolutely you remember. This depends. It just depends. If it's relatively recent, yes. These are people who were injured at work and they fall, they hurt their back, they have a bladder problem because of their nerve injury. So they're entitled to compensation in the state of California. So they need an expert to examine them and write a big report that goes to court, and they can depose you as if you were in court. So it's very similar to what the halacha just said. Iboilu. Atzmo mai. Can the Baldin remind the aide? The Baldin is the litigant. Right? They're claiming something about this litigant who owes money or whatever. Can he remind the aide about the events? I mean, l'chora, we would think no, right? He's a party to the case. He'd have to stay. Let's see what the halacha is. Rav Chaviva Amar Afilo Atzmo. That he can remind the aide. Mar B'Revashi Amar Atzmo Lo. V'Hilchasa Atzmo Lo. And of course, the halacha is no, he cannot remind it. Now, somebody else tells the aide, reminds him, that works. Even if it's the second aide, he cannot give testimony anymore because it's considered not partial, or it's not impartial. Period. Now let's go further. If the aide was a Talmid Chacham afilu atzmo, then the Baldin can remind him. Ravashi, of course, was a Turim Rabban, Talmid Chacham. He knew certain testimony regarding Rav Kahana. Amar le, mi dokar mar haisadusa. Rav Kahana asked Ravashi, do you remember what happened here? Amar le lo. Ravashi said no. Rav Kahana said, didn't this and this and this happen there? Lo yadana. Then he says, I don't remember. But then l'sof itka Ravashi. A half hour later, Ravashi remembered. You hear what the Gemara is saying here? He didn't. So Rav Kahana tries to tell him the story. He told him the story, but still Ravashi says it's not clear to me. I don't. But then it came back to Ravashi on his own, acidly, and he testified. Rav Kahana was concerned that maybe there's some good testimony. You think I'm relying on you? No, I remembered it myself. So if it works in that way, that the Baldin sort of tells you the story, you don't really remember it. And then maybe an hour later, it all comes back to you. That would work. Nanos. Hatlulius. Hakroivos. Now, the word tlulius, it sounds like the word Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
Tel is a mound. So tlulios are mounds. Hakroivos. Now, you have a mound of dirt. You don't know what's buried under it. Maybe it's something tummy. Maybe they buried a person there. We don't know. It's a suffix. Now, if it's close, if it's close to a city or a road, echad chadoshes ve'echad yeshanos, doesn't make it whether it's new or old. Timeos. We assume that the tel is tummy. Archokos. Now, if they're far away, we're going to define what these measures are. Chadoshes if they're new to hoyros. Because if it was new and somebody had been buried there, we would have known about it. Yeshanos, if they're ancient, tmeos, because we don't know. Now, ezeu kroiv. So first of all, in physical distance, when we say close to a city or not, chamishim amma, 50 amma, 100 feet. Ezeu yeshana, shishim shana. Something older than 60 years is called, anything from 60 years to yesterday is considered not yeshana. So, zivir of me. Rav Yehuda kroiv v'shein kroiv amen. Rav Yehuda doesn't put a distance on it. It says there are no closer mounds. This is the closest mount to the city. Yeshana shein adam zoicha. And old is where nobody remembers that period. Now, my ear, what's a city? What's a road? Ilema ear mamish. Are we talking about mamish a city? And derech mamish and a derech is a road. Now, misfeika mimachazchin and tuma. There is a din in Eretz Yisrael that we try to minimize the amount of land that is tomei. So we're not misafek going to be machazik land to be tomei. The Amar Reish Lakish, ilo matzav v'tiru Eretz Yisrael. That wherever they went, they were matayir Eretz Yisrael. Amrav Zera. So Ir means ira smuch lebeis hakfos. We're talking about a city that was near a cemetery. The derech beis hakfos, or a road that leads to a cemetery. Now we understand. Bishul derech beis hakfos. You find a mound next to a road that goes to a cemetery. They're trying to bury somebody Nebuch, Erev Shabbos. They don't have enough time to make the cemetery. What do? They quickly bury him in the road, in a mound right next to the road. Mikri kavu b'tem. And therefore, I can understand why a mound near a road, we have to be suspicious that there might be a mace there. You said a city near a cemetery. What do you mean? Kulu Beis HaKvoros. So again, everybody's going to the Beis. Everyone's going to the Beis HaKvoros in this area. Amrav Chanina, he took Shanashim Kover Sham Flame. Meaning, if you find a mound within 50 amos of the city, we worry that a lady went out by herself and buried like a miscarried child, which also would have to. Or mukishkin zroiseya, lepers. It's not really leprosy. It's another disease. Because leprosy.
Hansen's disease, that's very specific. Where
Because
the limbs fall out. I mean, other diseases.
Like there are. I don't think well, let's say this. Mukishkin could be leprosy. I wanted to,
Okay.
Saras is not leprosy.
Right.
Saras is not leprosy. Mukishkin, they have boils or Zorasean. And if you have a limb with skin, muscle, and bone, or sinew, muscle, and bone has to be buried. So the doctor, God forbid, amputates somebody's leg, it has to be buried with the body. So when the person dies 20 years later, something, they go to the pathologist, they get the thing, and they bury it all together. It's a din of kavura on a limb like that. Now, ad 50 shana azli il chuda. Within 50 amas, the woman will go by herself. Tfei, davar inish ba'ada. Man will go with him. If it's beyond 50 amas, so people will know about him because somebody accompanied him. Therefore, we reduce tumah there, so we don't increase it. Testimony will be remembered for 60 years. But But beyond 60 years, it won't be there. Below it's not so. Also, with Rami Amalek, in that case, he didn't. If somebody gives you a hint, and it's beyond 60 years, and you remember it, it'll work as well. Okay, we'll stop here because it starts a new Mishnah, which leads to a new Gemara. And Mirza Hashem, I'll be back in Los Angeles tomorrow night, and we'll have a regular Daf Yomi at 8:00 p.m. Okay, 8 p.m. my time, which is it 11? Please, we'll send you an email with the password numbers. Are we going to get everybody's email?
I got them for the pictures, but I'm going to have to then put them in the spreadsheet and send them out to everybody. So it's like,
that's good, yeah.
that's not going to happen so quickly. By the time we get home, we got to get stuff ready.
Okay, guys, have a safe trip back.
Thank you, Johnny.
Safe trip back.
Thank you.
Okay, see you soon.
Thank you very much.
for
Our pleasure. Oh, it was my pleasure.